Australia's unaffordable housing. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, I'm Florian Heise and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. Still working on my stein of coffee and avoiding my weekend chores. I hope you're having a good Saturday too. I thought we would have a look at this article discussing unaffordable housing here in Australia because it's a big issue, and contrary to the opinion of our glorious treasurer that, the housing market that is soaring will save the economy, it's not really affordable for a lot of people. And there's a whole generation that looks like they'll be completely disenfranchised from property ownership. So what's going to happen to all those boomers when they want to sell out? Home ownership is out of reach for disenfranchised millennials, says CoreLogic property analysts. So guys, before we get into this article, I'd like you to let me know if you had struggles. If you were a millennial, if you had struggles getting into the housing market, what were your tricks? What did you do? Or if you have children, and are you worried about them getting into the sector? Has it changed from when you were younger? The affordability ratios. I mean, it definitely has. And please share this video if you've got friends and family that are interested in property, the economics, just want to get a different perspective. Share this video with your friends and family so they might question a little bit what's being put in front of them in the news. Challenge the position that our treasurer is putting forward, that the housing market is going to lead to a booming recovery for the economy. At the very least, they can prepare, or you can say I told you so, when things eventually reach where they will. So the future is looking increasingly bleak for Australians, particularly millennials, who are trying to achieve the great Australian dream of owning their own house. Now, I think I'm a millennial. I'm just on the border of millennials. I'm just on the border. We're kind of the worst of both the millennial generation and the one before it. Here you go. Good old 80s kids. But then again, we all have children ourselves now. When you think millennials, they're bitching about the next generation. The latest Perceptions of Housing Affordability report by property analyst CoreLogic found 63% of Australians who are still living with their parents say they cannot afford to move out of home. 63%. Well, you know what it is, guys. It's just the smash avos on the weekend. Smash avo on toast. The report saw a surge in the number of people who think they will not be able to move out until they're at least 30 years old. In 2 years, that number has spiked. In 2 years, that number has spiked from 20 to 34%. Well, there you go. With most indicating they would probably rent before buying. The report proves that the cubby house syndrome, where children are prolonging their home stay with parents, is intensifying, says CoreLogic's International's chief executive, Lisa Claims. So, guys, let me know, are you one of these parents that has your kids and you can't get them out of the house? I know we've got a few older people in the demo watching, who would have kids, approaching 30. Can you get them out, or are they not leaving? Or it's just not affordable to say? I mean, the problem is it's a struggle to save for a mortgage, for a huge deposit, as well as paying rent. It's just double, so it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, if you think about this, in the past, multi-generational housing, and in a lot of cultures, multi-generational housing was the norm. The families would live together in the same household for multi-generations. You wouldn't always just kick out and do that. You'd build things together. So, in times past, that was more accepted. But then again, we've had a period of tremendous prosperity in Australia in the last century. And I mean, this fundamentally is a sign that is ending. I'd say that's a fundamental sign that is ending. And it's just a difference between cultures, but it's also a sign of prosperity. The report proves, I've already read that, a youngest generation is effectively being locked out of the market and increasingly dependent on parents. Increasingly dependent on parents. Now, it's a big issue. I'm going to bring up some data here, which I have. And this is it's showing you real estate investment. It's from the Foreign Investment Review Board, and you can see the black line, how high that is in 2015 to 16. That's foreign investment in there. So that's overheated our housing market. Blue is new property. Red is existing property. Okay, these are building approvals. I mean, look how high it is. That's overheated the market. So that's affecting a generation of Australians. Because we don't have the advantage of bringing foreign currency into the country. We don't have the advantage of earning in maybe US dollars. We're earning in Australian dollars, so we're competing with people that might have better conversion rates, better sources of income, or come from countries with less onerous tax or other laws. So, if millennials' affordability delusionment continues, we risk entrenching a generation who become disenfranchised from society. I'll press escape there because funny things are happening on my thing. So disenfranchised from society. The silver lining was that 54% of people among those surveys thought that housing affordability was the same or better than it was a year ago, due to falling property prices and interest rate cuts being at record lows in the past year. Well, okay, we'll have a look at some other information about that. It's all to do with perception too. Reality and perception are often different. However, the big picture is more pessimistic, with 83% of those who don't already own a property still worried about being able to afford their first home. CoreLogic surveyed 2,200 people across all states and territories aged between 18 to 69 years old to arrive at those findings. The unholy trinity of home ownership. Okay. CoreLogic also found that the biggest obstacle to home ownership was the unholy trinity: saving up for a deposit, getting approved for a home loan, and exorbitant stamp duties costs. Well, yeah, stamp duty is just because when we bought this place, we went through a lawyer and we got them to do all the conveyancing. We had to pay all this stamp duty, and what really pissed me off was the fact that the lawyer got automatically paid through the process. And I didn't know that. Now, I had never done conveyancing. I did it for my mother's property because I wanted to save her money. And I realized a few years later that it's just paperwork. It's just paperwork. And you're paying lawyers a lot of money for something a normal person can do. It's just navigating the bureaucracy. And stamp duty costs, I mean, it's another tax. It is essentially another tax on this transaction. It's the money. We looked at previously in Victoria, their state budget was in trouble because stamp duty costs decreased. In New South Wales now, their budget is billions of dollars missing because their stamp duty revenue is gone. This is just another tax. So the government can throw, what they'll do is they'll stamp duty and get money, and then they'll give it back to people in grants, and then they'll give you a little discount in the stamp duty, but it's the same bloody thing. This is the problem. Every time the money gets taken off one group through the government and spat out again, there's inefficiencies in the process. It's insane. It's insane. I mean, there you go. That's why we even have stamp duty. And why is it so expensive to literally stamp? I know why. I can see the value of having the titling process and recording all that information centrally, but there needs to be a way to do it more efficiently, particularly with modern technology. So it will take the average Australian almost 9 years to save up enough for a 20% deposit, especially at a time when pay rises are struck near record low levels. Well, yes, and with, business confidence down, as we saw this morning. Do you think, and unemployment up and job vacancies down? The Australian economy has been depressed for a decade. I mean, you're doing really well if you're scraping together a deposit. Good work. Just cutting out all that consumer spending. That's the thing. Almost half of them, 47%, say they were struggling to raise a deposit. The median house price in Australia is $533,000, according to CoreLogic's most recent findings. However, it will take much. Will take much longer. However, it'll take much longer if aspiring homeowners want to buy in the most expensive markets of Sydney and Melbourne, where the median prices are $700 and $877 respectively. That's just nuts. One of the major surprises in the report was how tough it had become for people to obtain a mortgage, said CoreLogic's head of research, Tim Lawless. He found that loan approval is now the second largest barriers for Australia trying to buy a home, with 45% saying this was a problem. Mr. Lawless noted this was a massive increase compared to 2 years ago, when it was the 6th most important concern and 39% considered it to be an obstacle. So I wonder if this has changed now after the Royal Commission. For some reason now they've made it much easier for people to get a loan. I mean, this is the thing. You've got people going there and crying on a current affair. Oh, the bank lent me so much money. I'm going bust now. Boo-hoo, boo-hoo. Let's make it tougher. And then you've got this other problem. Oh, it's so tough to get a loan. It's so tough. Maybe it's a blessing, actually, guys, that you're not trapped. The severe tightening of credit availability following stronger prudential regulation and outcomes relating to the Banking Royal Commission is hurting Australians who are struggling to get a loan, he said. Well, maybe they're not able to get a loan because their income isn't high enough or the spending is too high. I mean, you can't have it both ways, guys. Lenders also have a greater focus on evaluating and assessing individuals' borrowing expenses. Even if buyers are successful in getting a mortgage, it will remain a burden for a significant part of their lifetimes. People who typically spend around 35% of their annual salary repaying their home loans. So, opposition to stamp duty. 44% of those surveys said that stamp duty costs, which are 3% of the purchase price on average, were a significant barrier to ownership. Yes, I mean, that's another thing. You get the deposit, you still got to pay stamp duty. In addition, an overwhelming majority of people, 79%, thought that removing or even abolishing stamp duty was the best strategy to improve affordability. The figure was highest among baby boomers, with 87% supporting the removal of this property transaction tax. Even millennials and Gen Xers were united in their opposition to the tax levied on housing purchases. Fantastic. Fantastic. How often are taxes removed? Can anyone remember the last time a tax was completely removed in Australia? Can you let me know? So stamp duty varies significantly from house purchases across each capital, with the highest median costs seen in Melbourne and Sydney at $40,000 and $35,000 respectively. On the flip side, CoreLogic data showed the lowest median stamp duty for house purchases were Brisbane for 11 grand, Perth 16, Hobart 18. Yeah, that's still 11 grand, guys. $11,500 is still a lot of money. It's a lot of coffees you got to serve. It's a lot of projects you've got to do. It's not a small amount. In the middle of the pack were Canberra and Darwin. So let's just jump and have a look at this. This is from Housing Affordability. It's an older piece there from the government, but there's this graph here that I just want to show you. So it's dwelling prices to income ratios. So housing affordability in Australia has broadly declined since the 1980s. The OECD's price to income ratio index shows a 78% increase between 81 and 2015. In Sydney, which has experienced significant price rises over the period, parliamentary library calculations indicate that the ratio of average disposable household income Australia-wide to median house prices had increased from approximately 3.3 in June 81 to just over 7 in June 2015. The following graph illustrates Australia-wide ratios from the early 70s to 2002. Have a look here. And look at that. There you go. Why isn't, this needs to be included in inflation. I know why it's not. I don't agree with it, but it should be. Then how would the economy look? Look at that. Look at that. What's happened since there? And this data finishes at 2016, which is just before this. Just before this huge spike. So, yeah, well, what would your suggestions be? Guys, do you think this is going to affect a generation buying houses? And what it'll do, this will lead to people's failure to launch. If you don't get your own house, you're going to get the girl, you're going to get married, you're going to pump out the kids. Population growth, oh, it's declining. Uh-oh, what are we going to do? What's going to happen? It all builds upon itself, from one thing to another. And in another video, we'll look at, some of the government's ways at attempting to address this with housing grants, where it actually has the opposite effect. I would argue remove taxation from the system, make it houses simpler to build, remove some of the unnecessary legislative requirements. Maybe all simple thing, all the installation requirements. We have government now advocating for tiny homes, and there is a legislation difference between tiny homes and normal homes. So you're getting people living in houses which will have, some things like balustrades that you can fall through, unsafe clearance heights. So if you're promoting this type of thing, and to get around that, they're putting on a caravan chassis. If you're promoting this in one environment, maybe it's time to have a look at the housing environment to see how you could make that less onerous for people. There's a suggestion. All of these things provide savings, provide benefits. Let me know what your suggestions are on the video, guys, in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you all later today. Have a good weekend.